At a yacht party, she kicked a black billionaire, unaware he owns the yacht. Then came the payback. Cassandra Blake's designer heel drove straight up into Marcus Hamilton's groin with vicious force, the brutal impact causing him to double over as gasps of horror rippled across the pristine deck of Martha's Vineyard's most exclusive yacht party. The $50 million vessel fell into shocked silence as champagne glasses froze mid-air and socialites stared in disbelief. But the casually dressed black man she just viciously kicked didn't collapse. Fighting through the pain, Marcus straightened slowly, his calm eyes meeting hers with a composure that sent ice through her veins. What this racist socialite didn't know was that she just brutally assaulted the owner of the very yacht beneath her feet, and her privileged world was about to be obliterated in the most spectacular way possible. This is the story of how one savage kick exposed the ugly truth about power, privilege, and the price of prejudice. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's begin today's story. The sun hung low over Martha's Vineyard's exclusive Edgartown harbor, casting golden ripples across the pristine waters where mega-yachts bobbed like floating palaces. Among them, the Serenity's edge commanded attention, 264 feet of gleaming white perfection, her sleek lines cutting through the evening light like a blade through silk. Cassandra Blake stepped from her private helicopter onto the yacht's landing pad, her Louboutin heels clicking against the teak deck with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. At 42, she possessed the kind of effortless beauty that money could enhance but not create. Platinum blonde hair swept into a flawless chignon, emerald eyes that sparkled with inherited privilege, and a figure draped in a custom Valentino dress that cost more than most people's cars. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Blake," greeted Thomas Morrison, the yacht's captain, his weathered face creased with professional courtesy. The other guests are already enjoying cocktails on the main deck. Cassandra barely acknowledged him with a nod, her attention already drawn to the opulent surroundings. Crystal chandeliers caught the dying sunlight through floor-to-ceiling windows, while marble floors gleamed beneath her feet. This was her world, exclusive, expensive, and carefully curated to keep out anyone who didn't belong. "Cassie, darling," squealed Priscilla Whitworth, rushing over with champagne flute in hand, her surgically enhanced smile as bright as her tennis bracelet. "Can you believe this yacht? I heard it cost more than some small country's GDP." "It's adequate," Cassandra replied with practiced indifference, though her eyes swept appreciatively over the lavish decor. She'd learned long ago that showing enthusiasm was beneath someone of her standing. "Though I do hope they've properly vetted the staff. You know how these charity events can attract the wrong element." Priscilla's laugh tinkled like wind chimes. "Oh, you're terrible. But you're right to be cautious. These days, you never know who might try to infiltrate our circles." Cassandra accepted a crystal flute of Dom Perignon from a passing waiter, dismissing him with the same attention she'd give a piece of furniture. Her gaze drifted across the gathered crowd, familiar faces from the social pages, trust fund heirs, and old money aristocrats who moved through life with the unshakable confidence that came from never having to prove their worth. "I still can't believe we don't know who owns this magnificent vessel," whispered Margaret Ashford, joining their circle with a kind of gossip-hungry expression that fueled society gatherings. "All I know is it's some tech millionaire who made his fortune in Silicon Valley. Probably one of those nouveau riche types trying to buy their way into our world." "How deliciously mysterious," Cassandra mused, though her tone suggested she found nothing delicious about unknown quantities in her carefully ordered universe. "I do hope he has the good sense to stay out of sight. These self-made types rarely understand proper social etiquette." As the women continued their speculation, none noticed the man who'd been quietly moving through the crowd, ensuring drinks were refilled and guests were comfortable. Marcus Hamilton had perfected the art of invisibility, not because he lacked presence, but because years of experience had taught him the power of observation. At 38, Marcus possessed the kind of quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself. His 6-foot frame moved with an athlete's grace, broad shoulders filling out a simple navy polo that most would assume came from any department store. His dark skin held the warmth of someone who'd spent time in the sun by choice rather than necessity, and his deep brown eyes missed nothing, cataloging every interaction with the sharp intelligence that had built his empire. He'd started the evening watching from the upper deck as helicopters and luxury boats delivered his guests to the Serenity's edge. Each arrival had been a study in privilege. The casual way they stepped onto his yacht as if they owned it, the automatic assumption that they belonged, the unconscious dismissal of anyone they deemed beneath their station. Now, moving through the crowd with a tray of canapés, Marcus listened to conversations that would have made his grandmother shake her head in disgust. These people spoke about human beings like they were checking items off a grocery list, useful or disposable, acceptable or unwelcome. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice as Marcus navigated through a cluster of guests. He turned to find himself face to face with a woman whose beauty was as cold as her tone. "You're in my way." For a moment, their eyes met, emerald green clashing with warm brown. Cassandra Blake stood before him like a marble statue, perfect and untouchable, her gaze sliding over him with a kind of assessment she might give a piece of art she was considering purchasing. "My apologies, miss," Marcus replied quietly, stepping aside to let her pass. His voice carried the educated cadence of someone who debated in Harvard lecture halls, though she heard only what she expected, subservience wrapped in politeness. Cassandra moved past him without another word, but Marcus caught the subtle wrinkle of her nose, the way her shoulders tensed as if his very presence contaminated her space. He'd seen that look before, in boardrooms where men assumed his success was affirmative action, in restaurants where hostesses questioned his reservations, in 1,000 small moments that reminded him that no matter how much he achieved, some people would always see only the color of his skin. As the sun finally disappeared behind the horizon, the yacht's lights created a floating palace against the dark waters of Martha's Vineyard. The party moved into full swing, with guests flowing between the multiple decks, champagne flowing like water, and conversations growing more animated with each passing hour. Marcus continued his careful observation, watching the social dynamics play out like a choreographed dance. These were people who'd inherited their positions in life, who'd never known what it meant to fight for every opportunity, to prove themselves again and again in rooms where they were the only face that looked like theirs. And at the center of it all was Cassandra Blake, holding court like a queen among her subjects, her laughter ringing across the deck with the kind of careless joy that came from never having to wonder if she belonged. Neither of them could have predicted that within the next few hours, their worlds would collide in a way that would shatter everything they thought they knew about power, privilege, and the true measure of a person's worth. The stage was set, the players in position, and Martha's Vineyard's exclusive harbor would witness a confrontation that would forever change 2 lives. The gentle rocking of the Serenity's edge continued its rhythmic dance on the dark waters, but beneath the surface, currents were shifting, ready to pull both Marcus and Cassandra into depths neither had anticipated. What assumptions have you made about people that later proved completely wrong? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes our biggest mistakes teach us the most about ourselves. The collision happened in slow motion. Marcus Hamilton had been navigating through the crowd of Martha's Vineyard elite, carrying a tray of champagne flutes with the practiced ease of someone who understood balance, both physical and social. The yacht's gentle sway beneath his feet was as familiar as breathing, every creak and shift of the Serenity's dream as known to him as his own heartbeat. He'd been watching the guests all evening, noting the subtle hierarchies, the careful positioning, the way certain people gravitated toward others while avoiding the rest. It was a dance he'd observed countless times, though rarely as a participant. Tonight, dressed in simple khakis and a white polo shirt, he blended into the background by design. The woman, blonde, immaculate, dripping in jewelry that caught the yacht's ambient lighting, had been holding court near the starboard rail. Her voice carried across the deck, that particular pitch of privilege that demanded attention without asking for it. "I just don't understand why they insist on these charity events," she was saying to her small audience, gesturing with her champagne glass. "Half the staff probably makes more than the people we're supposedly helping." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept moving. He'd heard variations of this conversation before, at a dozen similar events. The casual dismissal, the easy assumptions, the comfortable distance from reality that money could buy. He was 3 steps past her group when the yacht hit a larger wake, the gentle roll sending champagne glasses singing against each other on his tray. Marcus adjusted smoothly, years of experience keeping everything balanced, but the slight shift in his path brought him closer to the rail. Closer to her. Cassandra Blake turned at precisely the wrong moment, her Hermes clutch swinging wide as she gestured, catching the corner of Marcus's tray. Crystal sang against crystal, and a single drop of Dom Perignon arced through the salt air, landing on the sleeve of her ivory silk dress. Time crystallized. The drop was barely visible, a tiny dark spot on the expensive fabric. But Cassandra's face transformed as if she'd been doused in acid. "Are you kidding me?" Her voice cut through the ambient party chatter like a blade through silk. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" Marcus set the tray down on a nearby table, his movements deliberate and controlled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was an accident. I can." "An accident?" Cassandra's laugh was sharp, brittle. "An accident is when you people break something in your own homes. This is incompetence." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that somehow carried across the deck. "Do you know where you are right now? This isn't some backyard barbecue in Detroit or wherever you crawled out of." The words hit Marcus like physical blows, each one precisely aimed. Around them, conversations faltered. Phones discreetly emerged, recording what was clearly about to become a moment. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the fire building in his chest. "I understand you're upset about your dress. Let me get you something to clean." "Don't you dare touch me." Cassandra's voice rose again, feeding off the attention of her growing audience. "I don't know who hired you or what rock they found you under, but service staff does not speak unless spoken to." She turned to her friends, her voice now performing for the crowd. "This is exactly what I was talking about. They let just anyone work these events now." Marcus felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders, the weight of every assumption, every casual cruelty, every moment when his presence had been questioned despite his achievements. But something else stirred too, something deeper and more dangerous. The quiet fury of a man who had built empires with his bare hands being told he didn't belong on his own yacht. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice carefully modulated. Professional. The same tone he used in boardrooms when lesser men tried to diminish him. That was when Cassandra Blake made her fatal mistake. "The only misunderstanding," she snapped, "is thinking you could bump into me without consequences." Her hand came up fast, manicured fingers spread wide, aiming for his face in a slap that never landed. Instead, her other foot lashed out, the pointed heel of her designer shoe connecting solidly with Marcus's shin. The impact was sharp, sudden, sending a jolt of pain up his leg that he absorbed without flinching. The yacht seemed to hold its breath. Around them, phones captured everything. The privileged white woman kicking a black man she assumed was hired help. The satisfied smirk that spread across her face as she looked down at him. The way she straightened her shoulders, as if violence had restored some natural order. "Now you know your place," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe next time you'll be more careful around your betters." Marcus looked down at his leg, then back up at her face. In that moment, suspended between impulse and calculation, he made a choice that would define everything that followed. He smiled. Not the bitter smile of someone planning revenge. Not the hollow smile of someone broken by cruelty. But the quiet, knowing smile of a man holding cards that hadn't been played yet. "Thank you," he said simply, bending to pick up a champagne glass that had fallen during the collision. That was illuminating. Cassandra blinked, clearly expecting a different response. Anger, perhaps. Submission, definitely. Not this calm acceptance that somehow felt more dangerous than either alternative. Just stay away from me," she said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Something in his eyes, in that smile, had shifted the ground beneath her feet. Marcus straightened, glass in hand, and looked directly at her. "I'll do my best, Ms. Blake. Cassandra Blake. And you'd better remember it." "Oh," Marcus said softly, that smile never wavering. "I don't think I could forget." He walked away then, leaving Cassandra standing among her friends, still riding the high of what she believed was victory. Around the yacht, guests resumed their conversations, but with a different energy now. Something had changed in the salt air, some balance had shifted. In the yacht's galley, Marcus rolled up his pant leg and examined the red mark where her heel had connected. It would bruise by morning, a physical reminder of assumptions made and prices yet to be paid. Through the galley's porthole, he could see Cassandra back in her element, already retelling the story to a fresh audience, each repetition making her the greater hero, him the more deserving victim. She had no idea that she was standing on his deck, drinking his champagne, breathing his air. But she would. Marcus Hamilton had built a fortune on patience, on letting opponents reveal themselves completely before making his move. Tonight would be no different. He just had to wait for the right moment to show Cassandra Blake exactly whose place she'd told him to know. The golden chandeliers of the yacht's upper deck cast dancing shadows across Cassandra Blake's face as she adjusted her Hermes clutch with practiced precision. The assault, though she'd never call it that, had left her feeling vindicated, powerful. She'd put that man in his place, reminded him of the natural order that governed spaces like this. "Did you see that?" she whispered to Miranda Whitmore, her longtime friend from the Greenwich Country Club, as they retreated to the yacht's exclusive bow lounge. "Some people just need to be reminded where they belong." Miranda shifted uncomfortably, her champagne flute trembling slightly. "Cassandra, that seemed excessive. He was just carrying drinks." "Exactly." Cassandra's voice carried the sharp edge of inherited authority. "The help should know to watch where they're going. My Louboutins are worth more than he probably makes in a month." She smoothed her silk Valentino dress, the fabric catching the harbor lights of Martha's Vineyard like liquid gold. Around them, the party continued its elegant symphony, crystal clinking, designer heels clicking against polished teak, the soft murmur of old money discussing newer acquisitions. But something had shifted in the atmosphere. Conversations seemed more hushed, glances more pointed. Cassandra basked in what she perceived as newfound respect. "Sometimes you have to be firm with these people," she continued, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "They get ideas above their station if you're too soft." But Marcus Hamilton wasn't retreating to some servant's quarters as she'd expected. Instead, he'd simply straightened his simple navy polo and dark jeans, picked up the scattered champagne flutes with methodical precision, and continued his work. His movements were fluid, practiced, not the hurried, apologetic scrambling she'd expected from someone properly chastened. From her perch on the leather banquette, Cassandra watched him navigate the crowd with unsettling confidence. He knew exactly where everything was: the backup champagne chiller behind the main bar, the hidden panel that controlled the deck lighting, the precise location of the yacht's emergency communication system. "Look at him," she muttered to Miranda, gesturing with her glass toward Marcus as he efficiently managed a minor spill near the starboard rail, acting like he owns the place. Miranda followed her gaze, frowning slightly. He does seem very familiar with the layout. Good help is hard to find, Cassandra dismissed with a wave. The owner probably keeps the same staff for consistency. Still doesn't excuse his clumsiness. But her certainty wavered for just a moment as she watched Marcus interact with the yacht's captain. Not the deferential nod of employee to superior, but an easy conversation between equals. The captain's body language spoke of respect, not hierarchy. Cassandra shook off the observation. Rich people had their quirks. Maybe this yacht owner was one of those bleeding-heart liberals who treated his staff like family. It was a weakness, in her opinion, but not uncommon among the nouveau riche. The problem, she announced to her growing circle of listeners, is that success has made some people too comfortable. They forget that there are still boundaries, still proper ways of behaving. Her voice carried across the deck, designed to be overheard. When you let standards slip, everyone suffers. Margaret Astor Price, a Boston blue blood whose family name adorned hospital wings, shifted in her seat. Perhaps we should focus on enjoying the evening? This charity event is raising money for education initiatives. Oh, Margaret, Cassandra laughed, the sound sharp as breaking crystal. Always the diplomat. But someone has to maintain standards. If we don't teach them proper behavior, who will? She gestured toward Marcus, who was now consulting with what appeared to be the yacht sommelier about wine pairings for the evening's progression. His knowledge seemed extensive, his manner authoritative rather than subservient. Besides, Cassandra continued, emboldened by what she perceived as her audience's attention, I did him a favor. A reality check. He'll thank me for it someday when he understands his place better. But the conversations around her were beginning to fragment. Murmurs of discomfort rippled through the gathered socialites like disturbed water. Thomas Brennan, heir to a shipping fortune, cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should consider that appearances can be deceiving, he offered carefully. Not everyone at an event like this fits the same mold. Cassandra's laugh was dismissive. Tommy, you're too trusting. I can spot them from a mile away, the way they carry themselves, their clothes, their entire demeanor. That man, she pointed directly at Marcus, who was now speaking with the yacht's chef about dietary restrictions for various guests, is hired help. Period. Her certainty was armor against the growing unease she felt but refused to acknowledge. The way other guests' eyes followed Marcus wasn't the casual disinterest usually reserved for service staff. There was something else there, recognition, perhaps even deference. You know what bothers me most? Cassandra continued, her voice rising slightly as if volume could reinforce her conviction. The entitlement. He bumped into me, and didn't even properly apologize. Just stood there like I owed him something. Miranda set down her champagne, the crystal ringing against the table with unusual force. Cassandra, maybe. No, Miranda. No maybes. Cassandra's interruption was swift, defensive. I know what I saw. I know who I'm dealing with. Some of us weren't raised to second-guess our instincts about people. But those instincts, inherited like her trust fund and her prejudices, were beginning to feel less reliable. Marcus moved through the party with the easy confidence of someone who belonged, not the studied deference of hired help, but the natural authority of ownership. She watched him pause at a group of tech executives, joining their conversation with obvious familiarity. One of them clapped him on the shoulder with genuine warmth, calling him by what sounded like a nickname she couldn't quite catch over the harbor breeze. Networking, she told herself firmly. Good help learns to schmooze. It's part of the job. But the doubt, once planted, grew like ivy in her chest. She found herself studying details she'd initially dismissed: the subtle quality of Marcus's watch, the way his posture never bent toward subservience, the ease with which he moved through spaces that should have been foreign to him. "I need another drink," she announced abruptly, rising from the banquette with perhaps more force than necessary. Her heels clicked against the deck as she made her way toward the main bar, chin lifted, shoulders squared against the whisper of uncertainty that had begun to follow her like a shadow. Behind her, the conversations resumed, but the tone had shifted. Where once there might have been admiration for her decisive action, now there was something else: speculation, discomfort, and the growing awareness that Cassandra Blake might have made a mistake far more significant than anyone initially realized. The Martha's Vineyard harbor stretched endlessly beyond the yacht's railings, dark water reflecting scattered lights like shattered diamonds. Beautiful, expensive, and potentially treacherous for those who assumed they knew how to navigate its depths. The first rumble of thunder caught everyone off guard. Cassandra Blake had been holding court on the upper deck, regaling a small circle of admirers with her version of the earlier incident. "You should have seen how quickly he scurried away," she laughed, gesturing with her champagne flute. "Some people really need to learn their place, don't they?" The second rumble was deeper, more ominous. The yacht's elegant lighting flickered as dark clouds rolled across Martha's Vineyard's typically serene horizon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the intercom, "we're experiencing an unexpected weather system. For your safety, please move to the main salon immediately." Cassandra rolled her eyes. How dramatic. "It's probably just a little summer shower." But even as she spoke, the first fat droplets began spattering the deck, followed quickly by sheets of rain that sent guests scrambling for cover. The exodus to the lower deck was chaotic but swift. Designer heels clicked against wet surfaces as perfectly coiffed hair wilted under the sudden downpour. Cassandra found herself swept along with the crowd, her earlier confidence dampened along with her silk dress. The main salon was impressive, all gleaming mahogany and brass fixtures, with panoramic windows that now showcased nature's fury. But with 40 guests suddenly compressed into the space, it felt uncomfortably intimate. Cassandra pressed herself against the far wall, surveying the room with displeasure. And there he was again. The man she'd put in his place earlier. He moved through the crowded salon with quiet efficiency, checking window latches and adjusting the lighting. His casual clothes, a simple navy polo and khakis, were completely dry, as if he'd anticipated the storm. While other staff members looked harried and uncertain, he radiated calm competence. "Excuse me," he said softly, approaching her corner. "I need to secure this window." Cassandra stiffened. "I'm perfectly fine here, thank you." "I'm sure you are," he replied evenly, reaching past her to test the window's seal. "But salt water and electronics don't mix well, especially on a vessel this sophisticated." His proximity made her uncomfortable. She could smell his cologne, expensive, subtle. Nothing like what hired help should wear. Since when do waiters know about boat electronics? A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "You'd be surprised what people learn when they pay attention." The yacht lurched slightly as a larger wave hit. Several guests stumbled, drinks sloshing. But the man beside Cassandra adjusted his stance with practiced ease, one hand instinctively steadying her elbow. She jerked away. "Don't touch me." "My apologies." His voice remained steady. "Just trying to help." Around them, the salon buzzed with nervous chatter. The storm was intensifying faster than anyone had expected. Lightning illuminated the windows in stark white flashes, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the entire vessel. "This is ridiculous," Cassandra muttered. "Who throws a party without checking the weather?" "The weather was supposed to be clear all evening," he said quietly. "Sometimes nature has other plans." She studied his profile as he continued checking the window mechanisms. There was something unsettling about his composure, the way he moved through the yacht systems like he owned them. Which was impossible, of course. She'd seen him serving drinks, cleaning up after guests. "How long have you worked on yachts?" she asked, partly from boredom, partly from an inexplicable curiosity. "A while." He turned to face her fully. "What about you? Do you sail?" The question caught her off guard. Staff didn't usually ask personal questions. "I have a boat in the Hamptons." Nothing like this, obviously. She gestured around the opulent salon. "This must belong to someone incredibly wealthy." "Incredibly," he agreed. Another guest approached, Patricia Worthington from the tennis club. "Cassandra, darling, what a dreadful turn of events. Though I must say, the staff is handling it beautifully. Especially this gentleman." She smiled at the man beside them. "You seem to know exactly what you're doing." "Thank you, ma'am. Just trying to keep everyone comfortable and safe." Patricia leaned closer to Cassandra. "He's been absolutely wonderful. Checked on Mother personally, made sure she had her medication. Not many service people show that kind of attention to detail." Cassandra felt a strange flutter of unease. Service people. The phrase sat oddly in her mind as she watched him move to the next window. His movements were too confident, too proprietary. And that watch on his wrist, was that a Patek Philippe? The yacht pitched again, more severely this time. The lights dimmed, then stabilized as backup systems engaged seamlessly. Around the salon, guests looked worried, but the mysterious man seemed utterly unconcerned. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried easily across the room without shouting, "the storm should pass within the hour. In the meantime, we have a full galley and an extensive wine collection. Please, make yourselves comfortable." Wait. Since when did serving staff make announcements to the guests? Cassandra watched as he moved toward the bar, other staff members deferring to him, seeking his input on everything from climate control to entertainment options. The yacht's actual crew, people she recognized as legitimate employees, kept glancing his way as if waiting for direction. "Excuse me," she called out, louder than necessary. He turned from where he was examining the sound system controls. "I said excuse me." "Yes, miss." "Who exactly are you to be making announcements? And why are you touching expensive equipment?" The salon fell quiet. Other guests turned to stare, sensing confrontation. The man straightened slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm just trying to ensure everyone has a pleasant evening, despite the weather." "That's not what I asked." Cassandra's voice sharpened. "I asked who you are. Because you're acting awfully familiar with a yacht that doesn't belong to you." The silence stretched. Outside, thunder crashed, but inside the salon, the tension was palpable. Other guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Finally, Patricia Worthington cleared her throat. "Cassandra, dear, perhaps." "No." Cassandra stepped forward, her earlier humiliation from being trapped below deck now morphing into aggressive suspicion. "I want an answer. Who are you really?" The man looked around the room, taking in the sea of expectant faces. When his gaze returned to Cassandra, something had shifted in his eyes. Not anger, but a quiet intensity that made her stomach tighten. "My name is Marcus," he said simply. "Marcus what?" Another pause. Another flash of lightning. "Hamilton." The name hung in the air like the storm outside, charged, electric, dangerous. Cassandra felt the first cold finger of real fear trace down her spine, though she couldn't yet articulate why. Around them, the yacht continued its gentle rocking, but the atmosphere in the salon had fundamentally changed. Some guests looked confused, others knowing. But all of them were watching Cassandra, waiting to see what she would do with the information she demanded. And Marcus Hamilton, whoever he really was, stood perfectly still, watching her process the implications of a name that clearly meant more than she understood. The storm outside raged on, but inside the salon, an entirely different kind of tempest was beginning to brew. The storm had trapped them all in the yacht's opulent main salon, a space that screamed wealth in every polished surface and handcrafted detail. Cassandra found herself nursing her third glass of champagne, her earlier triumph over the help now feeling oddly hollow as conversations swirled around her. "I still can't believe Hamilton managed to pull this event together," murmured Patricia Whitmore, a board member from the Children's Cancer Foundation. She adjusted her pearl necklace, speaking to her husband near the mahogany bar. "Donating his entire yacht for the charity auction? That's easily $1 million gesture." Cassandra's ears perked up. Hamilton. She glanced around the salon, her eyes landing on Marcus as he efficiently coordinated with the catering staff, his movements fluid and confident despite the yacht's gentle rocking. "Hamilton." Cassandra interjected, moving closer to Patricia. "Who's Hamilton?" Patricia looked surprised. "Marcus Hamilton, of course. The tech mogul who owns this beautiful vessel. You know, the man who revolutionized digital security after that terrible cyber attack on Detroit's power grid back in 2019. The champagne suddenly tasted bitter in Cassandra's mouth. I'm not familiar." "Oh, you must be. Hamilton Secure is practically synonymous with cybersecurity now. He grew up in Detroit, dirt poor they say. Lost his mother when he was just 12. Patricia's voice dropped to that conspiratorial whisper wealthy women used when discussing others' tragedies. "She died because they couldn't afford her medication. Can you imagine?" Across the salon, Marcus paused in his conversation with the yacht's captain, his hand momentarily stilling on a tablet as if he'd heard his mother mentioned. For a brief moment, his composed mask slipped, and Cassandra caught a glimpse of something raw, a pain that money couldn't erase. 12 years old, she thought, watching him. The same age I was when I got my first horse. How did he? Cassandra's voice caught. She cleared her throat. How did he become so successful? Full scholarship to Harvard, Patricia continued, clearly enjoying having an audience. Computer science, graduated summa cum laude. Then Silicon Valley, though he faced quite a bit of, well, you know how those tech circles can be. Not always welcoming to people like him. People like him. The phrase echoed in Cassandra's mind as she watched Marcus discuss something technical with one of the crew members, his expertise evident in every gesture. But the real breakthrough came after the Detroit incident, Patricia went on. He'd been working on this revolutionary security protocol, and when hackers took down half the city's infrastructure, his system was the only thing that held. Saved thousands of lives, really. Companies started throwing money at him after that. Marcus moved toward the salon's panoramic windows, checking the storm's progress. In the dim lighting, Cassandra noticed something she'd missed before, the watch on his wrist. Not just any watch. A Patek Philippe Nautilus, the same model her father had coveted for years but could never justify buying. She knew enough about luxury timepieces to recognize that particular model cost more than most people's cars. He bought this yacht last year, Patricia continued, oblivious to Cassandra's growing discomfort. The Phoenix, he named it. Appropriate, don't you think? Rising from the ashes of his childhood. The name hit Cassandra like a physical blow. Phoenix. Rebirth. Transformation. Everything she'd never had to earn. A memory surfaced unbidden, Marcus's reaction when she'd kicked him. The way he'd absorbed the blow without flinching, as if he'd weathered worse storms than her petty cruelty. The dignity in his silence. The controlled way he'd straightened his shirt, never once raising his voice or striking back. "Excuse me," Cassandra mumbled, moving away from Patricia toward the salon's far corner. She found herself studying the yacht's details with new eyes. The custom millwork wasn't just expensive, it was personal. African mahogany, she realized, likely chosen for its significance. The artwork adorning the walls wasn't random either. They were pieces by contemporary black artists, their bold strokes and vibrant colors telling stories of struggle and triumph. Near the main seating area, she spotted a small framed photograph almost hidden among the expensive decor. It showed a much younger Marcus in a graduation cap and gown, his arm around a frail woman whose eyes held the same gentle strength Cassandra had glimpsed in his. The woman wore a simple dress that had been carefully mended at the hem. "That's his mother, Diane." Cassandra spun around to find Marcus standing behind her, his voice quiet but not unkind. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of carrying himself with dignity in spaces where he wasn't always welcome. "She was a nurse," he continued, moving to stand beside her. "Worked double shifts at Detroit General to keep food on the table. Used to tell me that education was the one thing nobody could ever take away from me." Cassandra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to somehow undo the last few hours, but the words wouldn't come. "She died 3 weeks before I graduated high school," Marcus said, his fingers briefly touching the photo's frame. "Diabetes complications. The medication she needed, well, it was a choice between that and keeping the lights on." The storm outside seemed to quiet, as if the world itself was listening to his story. "I built Hamilton Secure for her," he continued. "Every algorithm, every security protocol, it all goes back to that night I watched her fade away in that hospital bed, knowing that if we just had a little more money, a little more access." He trailed off, then looked directly at Cassandra. "I swore I'd never let anyone else feel that powerless." Cassandra stared at the photograph, seeing not the hired help she'd imagined, but a son honoring his mother's memory. A man who'd transformed his pain into purpose, his struggle into strength. "The charity auction tonight," she whispered. "The Children's Cancer Foundation. Every dollar goes to families who can't afford treatment," Marcus confirmed. "Kids who shouldn't have to lose their parents to something as simple as money." As if from a great distance, Cassandra heard the storm beginning to subside outside. But inside her chest, a different kind of tempest was just beginning. The uncomfortable recognition that everything she thought she knew about power, about worth, about the man she'd so casually brutalized, had been built on lies she told herself about the world. Have you ever discovered that someone you judged was actually extraordinary? Sometimes our biggest assumptions blind us to incredible stories. What's a time you completely misjudged someone? Share below. These moments teach us the most about ourselves. The storm had passed, leaving the yacht's main salon filled with a nervous energy that Cassandra couldn't quite shake. She found herself watching Marcus more carefully now, though she told herself it was merely to ensure he stayed in his proper place. But something felt off. It started with small things. The way he moved through the yacht's corridors with absolute certainty, never hesitating at a turn or fumbling for a light switch. Most staff members, even experienced ones, showed some unfamiliarity with a vessel this size. Marcus moved like he'd walked these halls 1,000 times. "More champagne, miss?" he asked, appearing beside her with that same quiet composure. Cassandra nodded curtly, but as he poured, she noticed his hands. They were smooth, manicured. Not the hands of someone who did manual labor regularly. And that watch, she'd glimpsed it earlier but dismissed it. Now, in the salon's crystal chandelier light, she could see it clearly. A Patek Philippe. Easily worth more than most people's cars. That's quite an expensive timepiece for—" she began, then trailed off. "For someone like me?" Marcus's voice held no challenge, just quiet observation. Heat flushed her cheeks. "I didn't mean—" "Of course you did." He finished pouring and straightened. "It's all right. People see what they expect to see." Before she could respond, he moved on to other guests, leaving her with a strange hollow feeling in her stomach. Across the room, she watched him interact with a group of tech executives who'd been discussing blockchain technology. Instead of serving them silently, Marcus joined their conversation. "The security protocols you're describing are fundamentally flawed," she heard him say. "Any system that relies purely on encryption without behavioral analytics is essentially building a castle on sand." The executives turned to him with obvious interest, not dismissal. One of them, James Morrison, she recognized him from Forbes covers, actually stepped closer. "That's exactly what I've been saying," Morrison replied enthusiastically. "The Hamilton Protocol that came out of Silicon Valley last year addressed that exact issue. Revolutionary stuff." Cassandra's wine glass trembled in her hand. Hamilton. The name hit her like a physical blow. "You're familiar with Hamilton's work?" another executive asked Marcus. "Intimately," Marcus replied, and something in his tone made Cassandra's throat tighten. She forced herself to look away, to focus on other conversations, but her mind kept circling back. The yacht's owner was some tech billionaire named Hamilton. Marcus moved through this yacht like he owned it. Marcus was discussing advanced cybersecurity like an expert. Marcus wore a watch worth more than her monthly allowance. "Cassandra, darling, you look pale." Her friend Miranda appeared beside her, cocktail in hand. "Still thinking about that unfortunate incident earlier? What do you know about this yacht?" Cassandra asked suddenly. Miranda blinked. "Well, it belongs to that Hamilton fellow. The one who revolutionized digital security. Self-made billionaire, apparently started from nothing. Quite the success story." She sipped her drink thoughtfully. "I heard he grew up in some rough neighborhood in Detroit. Can you imagine? From the ghetto to Martha's Vineyard. Very inspiring, really." The words felt like stones dropping into Cassandra's stomach. Detroit. She thought about Marcus's subtle accent, the way certain vowels carried just a hint of Midwest inflection. "Have you met him?" Cassandra's voice came out smaller than intended. "The owner? No, he's quite private. Keeps to himself mostly. I'm not even sure he's here tonight, actually." Miranda glanced around the room. "These tech types can be so antisocial, you know." Across the room, Marcus was now speaking with the yacht's captain, discussing something about navigation systems with the casual expertise of someone who understood every inch of the vessel. Other guests deferred to him subtly, stepping aside when he passed, nodding respectfully when he spoke. Details she'd missed before now blazed like neon signs. "Miss Blake." She turned to find Marcus standing beside her again, this time holding a small plate of hors d'oeuvres. "You haven't eaten much this evening. These are quite good. The chef prepared them specially for tonight's event." "The chef you know personally?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuine rather than professional. "I do tend to be particular about the food served at my—" He paused, seeming to catch himself. "At events I'm working." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You're what?" "Nothing, miss. Just the ramblings of tired staff." But his eyes held something that might have been amusement. Or pity. He moved away again, leaving Cassandra standing frozen in the middle of conversations that seemed to swirl around her without touching. Every interaction she observed felt like another piece of a puzzle she was terrified to complete. The way other staff members looked to Marcus for direction when they thought guests weren't watching. The way he knew exactly where every switch, every control, every amenity was located. The way he spoke about the yacht systems with proprietary knowledge. "God, what have I done?" she whispered to herself. "Excuse me?" Miranda asked. "Nothing." Excuse me." Cassandra hurried toward the yacht's stern, needing air, needing space to think. But as she passed the main staircase, she overheard two crew members talking in hushed tones. Mr. Hamilton seemed pretty calm about what happened earlier, considering, one said. "That's just his way," the other replied. "Man's got more patience than job. Though I saw his jaw clench when that woman kicked him. If someone had done that to me." Cassandra's legs gave out. She had to grip the railing to keep from falling. Mr. Hamilton. The crew was talking about Marcus as Mr. Hamilton. The magnitude of her mistake crashed over her in waves. She'd assaulted the owner of the yacht. She'd treated a self-made billionaire like hired help. She'd let every ugly assumption, every inherited prejudice, guide her actions toward a man who was everything she pretended to be but had never earned. Standing there in the gentle night breeze off Martha's Vineyard, surrounded by the luxury that Marcus Hamilton had built with his own brilliance and determination, Cassandra Blake finally understood the difference between inherited privilege and earned success. And she realized, with crystalline clarity, that she was about to face the consequences of a lifetime of assumptions wrapped up in one devastating moment of truth. Have you ever realized too late that your first impression of someone was completely wrong? Share a time when someone surprised you by being different than you expected. We all have these moments of realization. The storm had passed as quickly as it arrived, leaving Martha's Vineyard's waters mirror-smooth beneath a canopy of emerging stars. The yacht's deck glistened with droplets that caught the harbor lights like scattered diamonds. Cassandra emerged from below, her earlier confidence restored now that the cramped confines no longer forced her proximity to him. She smoothed her designer dress and lifted her chin, ready to reclaim her position among the elite guests who mattered. The charity auction was resuming on the main deck, and Cassandra positioned herself prominently near the auction podium, wineglass in hand. Around her, the who's who of East Coast society chatted in hushed, important tones about their latest acquisitions and philanthropic endeavors. This was her world, predictable, orderly, where everyone knew their place. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the yacht's sound system, cutting through the murmur of conversations. "Before we continue with tonight's charity auction for the Detroit Youth Technology Initiative, I'd like to take a moment to thank our gracious host." Cassandra barely listened, instead scanning the crowd for familiar faces. The Vanderbilts were here, as were the Astors. Old money, real money. People who understood the natural hierarchy of things. Mr. Marcus Hamilton has opened his beautiful yacht, the Determination, to us tonight, and his generosity continues to change lives across the country through his foundation's work in underserved communities. The blood in Cassandra's veins turned to ice water. Marcus Hamilton. The name hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. She watched in slow-motion horror as every head on the deck turned toward the man she had kicked, the man she had berated, the man she had dismissed as hired help. The casual server who had been moving through the crowd with quiet efficiency all evening now stepped forward with the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible above the gentle lapping of waves against the yacht's hull. Marcus nodded graciously to Captain Morrison, his earlier casual demeanor replaced by the unmistakable bearing of a man worth billions. "Thank you, Captain Morrison. And thank you all for being here tonight." His voice, the same voice that had remained calm when she'd screamed at him, that had said yes, ma'am when she demanded he know his place, now commanded the attention of some of America's wealthiest and most powerful people. Cassandra's wine glass slipped from her numb fingers, shattering against the deck with a sound that seemed to echo her crumbling world. Red wine spread across the pristine white deck like blood, staining everything it touched. "The Detroit Youth Technology Initiative," Marcus continued, seemingly unaware of Cassandra's internal collapse, "is particularly close to my heart because I know what it's like to be a kid from the inner city who dreams of something bigger. Technology gave me a way out, and now it's our responsibility to give that same opportunity to the next generation." Self-made. The words from earlier conversations crashed over her like a tidal wave. Revolutionized digital security. Harvard MBA. Youngest billionaire in tech. Every assumption she'd made, every sneer, every moment of entitled superiority, all of it built on nothing but the color of his skin and her own poisonous prejudices. Around her, the crowd erupted in appreciative applause. The same people who had watched her kick him, who had heard her venomous words about the help, now clapped enthusiastically for the man she had assaulted. "Oh my God," whispered Patricia Whitman, one of Cassandra's usual social circle, standing just close enough for Cassandra to hear. "Did you see what that Blake woman did to him earlier? How absolutely mortifying." "Completely embarrassing," agreed another voice. "I can't believe she didn't recognize Marcus Hamilton. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows who he is." The words hammered into Cassandra's consciousness like nails in a coffin. Of course they did. Marcus Hamilton, the Marcus Hamilton, whose face had graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Time magazines. The man whose rags-to-riches story had inspired countless articles and documentaries. The philanthropist whose donations had funded schools, hospitals, and community centers across the country. She remembered now with crystal clarity, seeing those magazine covers, reading those articles. But the man in those photos, in expensive suits, photographed in boardrooms and at galas, had never connected in her mind with a casually dressed black man serving drinks at the party. Her prejudice had been a filter so strong it literally blinded her to reality. The charity auction continued around her, but Cassandra heard none of it. She was drowning in the magnitude of her mistake, in the crushing weight of her own ignorance. Every word she'd spoken, every assumption she'd made, every moment of her entitled rage, it all played back in her mind like a horror film where she was the monster. Marcus's eyes found hers across the crowd, and for a moment, time stopped. There was no anger in his gaze, no triumph, no cruel satisfaction. There was something far worse, disappointment. Not surprise, as if he'd expected exactly this kind of treatment, but a deep, weary disappointment in humanity itself. That look shattered something inside her that she didn't even know existed. "The auction will continue," Marcus announced, his voice steady and professional. "But first, I'd like to share a brief video about the young people your donations tonight will help support." As the large screen descended and the lights dimmed for the presentation, Cassandra found herself paralyzed. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even cry. She simply stood there among the broken glass and spilled wine, a living testament to the destruction that prejudice could wreak, not just on its victims, but on those who carried it. The video began showing bright, eager faces of children from Detroit, kids who looked like Marcus might have looked 30 years ago. Kids with dreams as big as his had once been, needing only the chance that technology and generosity could provide. Cassandra watched those faces and realized she was staring into the past of the man she had tried to humiliate. The billionaire she had kicked. The philanthropist she had dismissed as hired help. The man who owned everything beneath her feet, including the very deck she stood on, trembling with the knowledge that her world would never be the same. The main salon had emptied after the captain's announcement, leaving only the soft hum of the yacht systems and the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Cassandra sat alone in a corner booth, her Hermes clutch forgotten on the Italian leather beside her, her perfectly manicured hands trembling as she stared at the mahogany table. Marcus Hamilton. The name echoed in her mind like a death knell. She'd kicked Marcus Hamilton, the Marcus Hamilton who'd revolutionized cybersecurity, whose net worth exceeded most small countries' GDP, whose philanthropic work had been featured on every major news outlet. The man whose yacht she was sitting on. The man whose charity event she'd been invited to attend. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The walls of the luxurious salon seemed to close in around her, each expensive detail now a reminder of her catastrophic error. The hand-carved moldings, the crystal chandeliers, the priceless artwork, all of it belonged to the man she'd treated like hired help. "God, what have I done?" she whispered to the empty room, her voice breaking. Through the panoramic windows, she watched other guests on the upper deck, their animated conversations carrying on the night breeze. None of them looked her way. Word would spread, it always did in their circles. By tomorrow morning, everyone from the Hamptons to Beverly Hills would know about Cassandra Blake's spectacular humiliation at Marcus Hamilton's charity gala. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Miranda. "Girl, people are saying you had some kind of incident with the host? Call me." Cassandra's stomach churned. She powered off the phone and buried her face in her hands. "The view's better up there," a familiar voice said softly. She looked up to find Marcus standing a few feet away, 2 steaming cups of coffee in his hands. He'd changed from his casual clothes into a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than her car, yet his expression held no malice, only a quiet intensity that made her chest tighten. "I thought you might need this," he continued, setting 1 cup on the table between them. "It's been a long evening." Cassandra stared at the coffee, unable to comprehend his gesture. "I don't understand." "What don't you understand?" "Why you're being—" She struggled for words. "Kind. After what I did." Marcus settled into the seat across from her, his movements deliberate and controlled. "What did you do, Cassandra?" The question hung between them like a blade. She could deflect, make excuses, blame the lighting or her stress or the champagne. She could minimize it, call it a misunderstanding, a simple mistake. That's what the old Cassandra would have done. But something in his steady gaze stripped away her usual defenses. "I assaulted you," she said finally, the words scraping her throat raw. "I kicked you because I assumed you were, because I thought you were." "Say it." Her hands shook as she reached for the coffee, using the warmth to anchor herself. "Because you're black, and you were dressed casually, and in my twisted worldview, that meant you were staff. Hired help. Someone beneath me." The admission felt like swallowing glass. "I hurt you because of the color of your skin and my own ignorant assumptions." Marcus nodded slowly. "And how does that make you feel?" "Disgusted. Ashamed. Terrified." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I've spent my whole life thinking I was better than people thinking I was better than people, period. But I'm not, am I? I'm just a trust fund princess with her head so far up her own ass that she can't see the world around her. That's one way to look at it." She laughed bitterly. "Is there another way? You could choose to be different." The simplicity of the statement caught her off guard. "What?" "You made a choice tonight, a bad one based on prejudice and entitlement. But sitting here right now, you have another choice. You can double down, blame everyone but yourself, and go back to your bubble. Or—" He leaned forward slightly. "You can do the harder thing." "Which is?" "Face who you really are. Not who your parents raised you to be, not who your social circle expects you to be. Who you choose to be from this moment forward." Cassandra felt tears threatening, the first genuine tears she'd cried in years. "I don't know how." "Start with the truth. All of it. She took a shaky sip of coffee, buying time. But Marcus waited with infinite patience, and eventually the dam broke. My grandfather built his fortune in the Jim Crow South, she said quietly. Real estate developments that deliberately excluded black families. My father expanded the business using the same principles, just more subtle, more legal. I grew up hearing that those people would lower property values, destroy neighborhoods. It was gospel in our house. Marcus's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. I never questioned it, she continued. Why would I? It benefited me. It made me rich. It made me feel superior. And when I saw you tonight, dressed down, helping with party setup. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I saw an opportunity to put someone in what I thought was their place. To flex the power I thought I had. And now I realize the only place I belong is rock bottom. She met his gaze directly for the first time since he'd sat down. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so goddamn sorry. Not because you're successful, not because I got caught, but because I hurt another human being based on nothing but my own poisonous assumptions. You didn't deserve that. No one deserves that. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the yacht's gentle motion and the distant sound of laughter from the upper deck. Finally, Marcus spoke. Apology accepted. Cassandra blinked, certain she'd misheard. What? I said your apology is accepted. He stood, extending his hand toward her. The question now is what you're going to do with that forgiveness. She stared at his outstretched hand, the same hand she'd seen him use to expertly navigate the yacht systems, to serve drinks with quiet dignity, to maintain his composure when she'd attacked him. Now it was offered to her in grace she didn't deserve. Slowly, she reached out and took it. Have you ever had to choose between defending your pride and admitting a painful truth about yourself? What did you choose, and how did it change you? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes our darkest moments lead to our greatest growth. The charity auction had ended hours ago, most guests departing on the tender boats back to Martha's Vineyard's exclusive Edgartown harbor. Only a handful remained on Marcus's yacht, the Phoenix, as it anchored beneath a canopy of stars. The earlier storm had cleared the air, leaving everything crisp and electric with possibility. Cassandra Blake stood alone at the bow, exactly where this nightmare had begun 3 hours earlier. Her Hermes clutch trembled in her manicured hands as she stared at the dark waters of Nantucket Sound. The designer gown that had made her feel so superior now felt like a costume. Expensive fabric draped over a hollow performance of privilege. I thought I might find you here. Marcus's voice was gentle, lacking any trace of the controlled fury she'd seen earlier. She didn't turn around, couldn't face him yet. I keep replaying it, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the yacht's gentle rocking. The look in your eyes when I kicked you. The way you didn't even flinch. Like you were used to it. Marcus moved to the railing beside her, maintaining respectful distance. Up close, she could see the subtle signs of his success she'd missed before. The custom-tailored casual shirt, the Patek Philippe watch, the quiet confidence that came from building something extraordinary from nothing. I was 12 when it first happened, he said quietly, looking out at Martha's Vineyard's twinkling lights. Detroit. Different circumstances, same assumptions. I learned early that responding with anger only confirmed their prejudices. Cassandra's breath hitched. How do you not hate people like me? Because hate is a poison that destroys the vessel that carries it. Marcus turned to face her fully. My grandmother used to say that. Raised me after my mother died when I was 8. Worked 3 jobs to keep me in school, never let me use our circumstances as an excuse. For the first time since the revelation, Cassandra met his eyes. What she saw there wasn't the anger she deserved. It was something harder to bear. Compassion. I built Hamilton Technologies not just to succeed, but to prove something, Marcus continued. That brilliance, determination, and character matter more than the color of your skin or the size of your bank account. Every algorithm I wrote, every company I acquired, every dollar I earned was a response to people who assumed I didn't belong. And I became everything you were fighting against. The words scraped her throat raw. No, Marcus said firmly. You became trapped by assumptions handed down to you. There's a difference between being taught wrong and choosing wrong. Cassandra finally turned to face him completely, tears streaming down her face, no longer caring about her makeup or appearance. I don't know how to be different. This world, Newport, the Hamptons, Martha's Vineyard, it's all I've ever known. The charity boards, the social hierarchies. I was taught that maintaining those boundaries was protecting something valuable. What were you protecting, Cassandra? The question hung in the salt air like a challenge. She searched for the familiar answers, tradition, standards, proper society, but they crumbled under his steady gaze. Nothing, she whispered. I was protecting nothing but my own fear of being irrelevant. Marcus nodded slowly. My company revolutionized cybersecurity by finding vulnerabilities others missed. The most dangerous flaws aren't the obvious ones. They're the inherited weaknesses that go unexamined for years. The metaphor landed like a gentle blow. Cassandra understood. I want to apologize, she said, her voice stronger now. Not just for tonight, but for every assumption, every entitled thought, every moment I treated someone as less than human because of how they looked or where I thought they belonged. Apologizing to me is just the beginning, Marcus replied. The real work happens when you go back to your world and make different choices. Could you help me understand? I don't want to be who I was tonight ever again. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the yacht's soft lighting. When he spoke, his voice carried decades of hard-won wisdom. Real change doesn't happen overnight, Cassandra. It happens in 1,000 small moments when you choose to see people's humanity instead of your assumptions. When you use your privilege to lift others instead of protecting your position. I want to try. I need to try. Then start tomorrow. Join the foundation board for Hamilton Technologies. We fund scholarships for underprivileged kids in STEM fields. Use your connections, your social access, but this time, use them to open doors instead of closing them. Cassandra felt something crack open in her chest, a space she didn't know existed, hungry for purpose beyond social status. Why would you give me that chance after what I did? Marcus smiled for the first time that evening, and it transformed his entire face. Because my grandmother also taught me that love is stronger than hate. Not romantic love, the love that recognizes the divine spark in every person and calls it forth, even from the darkest places. The yacht rocked gently as a breeze picked up from the southwest, carrying the scent of Martha's Vineyard's famous beaches. Cassandra breathed it in like it was the first clean air she'd tasted in years. Thank you, she said simply, for showing me grace when I deserved judgment. We all deserve grace, Cassandra. The question is whether we're brave enough to accept it and pass it on. As they stood there in companionable silence, both looking out at the water that had witnessed their transformation, Cassandra felt the weight of her old life lifting. Tomorrow would bring the hard work of becoming someone worthy of the second chance she'd been given. But tonight, under the stars above Martha's Vineyard, she had learned that unexpected love could bloom even in the aftermath of hatred. Not the love between two people, but the love that sees past every barrier to the humanity waiting underneath. The yacht's engine hummed to life as Captain Morrison prepared for the journey back to harbor. But for Cassandra Blake, the real journey was just beginning. Have you ever been given an unexpected second chance that changed your life? Or maybe you've been the one to offer grace when someone deserved judgment. Share your story of transformation in the comments. Sometimes the most beautiful changes come from the most unlikely places. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will surely enjoy the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.